You see that aerobatic maneuver there. We're joined with our Grand Marshal this year, Randy Duke Cunningham. You know, I have a resume a mile long for him. Navy Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 15 Air Medals, 3 Navy Commendation Medals, a Purple Heart. We're just real thrilled to have him here. We also have a very special guest, and that's actually his title, very special guest for the Oxnard Airshow, Chris Marshall. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Welcome to the program. Now, I was overhearing a conversation you had earlier. Someone asked you, hey, Chris, have you met Randy Cunningham? He's here. You might want to talk to him. And you said, yeah, I flew to Paris with him. How did that happen? You met him last year at the Oxnard Airshow.
Yeah, I met him last year at the, right here in Oxnard Airshow at the barbecue that they had. And I followed him around right 2 inches away from his heels, so.
You never got about more than 2 inches away from my heels the whole time, so we became good buddies.
You had a little fan following you around.
Well, I was his fan too.
Okay. And what happened? What all led up to this trip to Paris?
Okay, well, first of all, I asked him if he wanted to do a flight around the world, and he said, no, I would rather do a shorter flight. So then we thought it over lots of times, and we decided to fly to Paris and retrace Charles Lindbergh's flight.
And how'd the flight go overall?
Chris did beautifully on the flight. The airplane, the Mooney 252, is the most fantastic airplane. If anyone's ever flown one, they know what I'm talking about. We had a few problems. We had a couple emergencies that we basically created ourselves. We had camera gear like you have here in the airplane to document it, and it caused the voltage regulator to go bad. We had to replace that. We lost on a pre-flight item. It was my fault. The dipstick came out. We lost oil over the middle of the Atlantic and had to land at 2,000-foot dirt strip with a quarter-mile in fog and 100-foot overcast right in the middle of mountains. And that was just about the closest I've ever come in an airplane to not making it. Chris, of course, was tired. I only got about 2.5 hours sleep a night for about 12 days. And but when we saw Le Bourget in Paris, Chris, his adrenaline when we took off out of Scotland was, you know, he was all fired up and he knew that the goal was in sight, so he really perked up and did good. He did a pretty good job.
That's terrific. Let's take a break here and look at the aerobatics going on out here at the Oxnard Airshow. Talking about G's earlier, I'm sure he's feeling a few of them as
well,
he goes
right now, so he's going right there on the pull. He's pulling against gravity. Now he's going inverted pulling, but he has positive G's on the airplane. And he'll pull probably 5 or 6 G's in this, both positive and negative. When he goes up against gravity, he's positive G's. When he goes over and pushes over, or pushes inverted, then he's going negative G's.
Straight up a telephone pole, just came over the top very fast.
All right, the applause you hear for Smokin' Thunder, the jet-powered dragster, reaching about 300 miles an hour earlier. Now, Christopher, was this the landing you were mentioning earlier that took place in Iceland? Was that the one?
In
Greenland.
Greenland.
Coolest
Okay.
little island.
Okay, it was just the 2 of you on board this.
Yes.
Right. Do you plan to do anything again together? Any flights?
Hopefully around the world.
Around the world?
Yeah.
He wants to go around the world and make that kind of a flight. If we do it, it'll have to be on a much longer time frame. Some of the restrictions that I placed on the flight was that it never would exceed 8 or 9 hours for Chris. You know, he's 11 years old. You get an 11-year-old tiger in a cockpit, he gets tired real easy, he just go to sleep. The trip was very hard on him to make that kind of a flight. Also, he's not trained to fly IFR. He ended up doing a little bit of it, but he did pretty well with that too on the instruments. Even going into Scotland, we were going in at night, went through some clouds. He held right on course, right on altitude. If we make a round the world flight, then he's going to have to, it'll have to be planned where if we go somewhere, the weather's real bad, we'll stay there until the weather clears so he can fly. He's not trained to fly instruments yet, and he can, but our whole purpose in the flight is not really to establish any records, but to get young kids interested. When Chris made his historic flight across the United States, if you follow now, there's a lot of the kids starting to fly. At National University, where I'm dean of the flight school and director of marketing, there's kids all the time said, hey, we saw Chris fly across the United States, we want to do it too. And that's the whole idea of this flight, was not to establish a record, but to show that kids, they can fly. It's not just the other person's dream, that they can do it too, and they can get started. The Civil Aeronautics Patrol, or Civil Air Patrol, that the kids can get into is like Pop Warner League football. Air Scouts, Sea Scouts, kids building and model builders clubs to get involved. I think Chris started with his dad when you're 4 years old, Chris?
Yeah.
4 years old.
4 years old.
I started out at this airport too.
Out of Oxnard.
Out of Oxnard.
That's terrific.
His dad is an airline pilot.
For Del
Welcome back to the Oxnard Air Show. That's David Byrne, pilot flying above there, making me dizzy just watching it. We're here with the president of National Aviation Day, also one of the performers from earlier, John Culver.
There he goes. Oh, look at that. Corkscrewing up. What do you call that, John?
That's a Lumshabach maneuver where he's actually stalled the aircraft in a vertical plane until it actually runs out of momentum, then comes back down.
For such a small airplane, it sure makes a lot of noise. What kind of engines do you have in there?
He's got a Lycoming 180 horsepower, 360 cubic inch engine in that aircraft, capable of inverted flight. And he's turning up somewhere around 3,400 RPM on the bottom of his maneuvers to accelerate the aircraft. That aircraft there, the Pit Special, weighs about 900 to 1,000 pounds maximum. So he's really horsing that little airplane around real nice and smooth. He's got a good handle on it.
It's exciting. Just watching Crash Burn and Smoke and Thunder being drawn by here at the crowd line. That's what all the clapping was about. John, tell us a little bit about your airplane. You fly, where that, World War II trainer?
Yeah, it's a World War II AT-6, or SNJ, it's called. Texan, and it's been called a number of names to the cadets who flew them back in the war. This particular airplane that I own and fly in the show is built in 1940. And it was first stationed in El Toro, California, and then moved down to Miramar till the end of the war.
You know, John, I was just going to comment that you're watching this on TV right now, and it's even much better out here when you're out here on the stands and seeing it firsthand, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, actually. Watching these maneuvers and watching the pilots, and of course just being back on the ground from doing nearly almost the same type of maneuvers, I can sure appreciate what Dave's going through and the conditions, the weather conditions he's going with.
Why did you choose to fly the 1944 plane instead of something a little more modern?
Well, actually, there's a lot on the net, nostalgia, I guess, with it, and 1944 and World War II era warbirds, if you will. They've been coming up in popularity with a lot of the, of course, current movies out, so on, and it's a challenge to fly. This airplane I fly is 6,000 pounds, 3 tons of aircraft, and moving it across the ground in low-altitude environment is quite a challenge, and it's a little bit different than most airshow aircraft, so it's a variety for the crowd.
It is a unique act. Is that one of the reasons you chose him for today?
Yes, yes. John does fly a very unique act. In fact, the type of aerobatics he does in this act, they wouldn't let the military people do at the time they're doing the training, because it does take more of a degree of skill to fly that airplane. Especially in an inverted system, turning it upside down. And if you hear the act, and there's sometimes the engine actually quits because it runs out of fuel there for a few seconds, so that's exciting too.
That's correct. I don't have any modifications to my aircraft for airshow work, so when I do in fact roll the aircraft inverted, the fuel does run out of the carburetor momentarily. You might hear a slight interruption in fuel as I go around on a negative G roll. So, but naturally, keeping yourself positioned and knowing where you are at all times, keeping the roll going, there's no problem whatsoever.
Now, how many air shows a year do you do normally?
Generally, I do a variety of shows from military to civilian, benefit shows, generally around 15 a year, 15 to 20.
Is it considered amongst, you know, loud?
Yes, it is.
Is it considered a profession, a hobby? What is it?
Well, actually, it's a supplemental sort of income and hobby. During the weekdays, I fly for the Northrop Corporation. I'm a corporate pilot by trade, flying turboprop aircraft, VIPs, to and from strategic locations for Northrop. On the weekends, though, this is sort of my relaxation, if you will, is to fly the air shows.
What do you think about the Oxnard Air Show?
It's actually one of the best that I have ever performed at, and this year has been the greatest, most outstanding well-run show I've been to all year. In fact, up to date.
That's terrific. How does that make you feel?
Makes me feel good. In fact, it was really nice to see John when in his tuxedo last night on Friday night. That was exciting.
I bet. John, thank you for being on the show with us.
Thank you very much.
And congratulations on your performance. I know it was a real crowd pleaser from down here. So.
Great.
Okay. All right, we'll be right back with more of the Oxnard Air Show. Bye-bye.
As an amateur pilot, this is fun. This is Walter Mitty stuff for me. I really enjoy the heck out of it.
I bet, and you're even sitting next to one of the greatest aerobatic pilots. We saw him twice already today. You look a little tired, David Byrne.
A little tired. I had to do it twice today.
Yeah. Does it physically exhaust you?
Well, I first flew the Stearman, and that's a very large airplane, and it physically takes a lot of strength to move the controls. Then I flew the Pitt Special, which doesn't take much muscle to move it around, but some of the forces that it subjects me to is fairly strong, the positive and negative G's. So, the two different types of airplanes, and they tire me out in two different types of ways.
You like flying two different types like that?
Yeah. Yes.
Keeps it more interesting?
Yeah. It's nice to be able to come to a show and get the opportunity to do both.
Now, I read that you've been flying about 7 years, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I started flying
Doesn't
when I
seem
was...
that long for some reason, considering what you can do up there.
Yeah.
Started when I was 17 and then 24 now, so 7 years.
I feel very old. He's wonderful. He really pushes it to the limit, too. I enjoy watching him work.
Thank you.
Do you do a lot of shows?
I do about 7 or 8 a year. I'm also involved in International Aerobatic Club competition, and I do about 5 or 6 contests in California each year.
When you initially got into flying, were you thinking more just for transportation, for fun, and how did you get into
It
aerobatics?
was just a hobby. I was a French horn player, and I was in school pursuing a career as a musician, and I was freelancing around Southern California, and I knew a violist who was a flight instructor, and one day he said, you know, if you want to go for an airplane ride, just let me know. I took him up on it and have been hooked ever since.
Well, it seems that most pilots start, well, not most, but a lot of them kind of start accidentally. It gets in your blood, and it's something you just can't get rid of. I know that's kind of what we were talking about when I spoke with you the other day.
Right. It's a passion. It's a real love affair. And it's funny. Pilots are very strange because an airplane cannot go through the sky without a pilot looking up and checking it out. There's just, I think we're crazy.
And naming everything about it that they possibly can.
Well, it's the type of hobby. I fly for a living, but this type of flying is really my passion. And you don't find people that just get involved in it for a year or so and get out of it. You know, most people that really get involved stick with it for a lifetime.
How much do you practice?
Well, for each air show, I try and schedule at least 5 practice sessions for that given show. Each airport, each contest has different conditions. It's a different airport. I put on a slightly different routine each time, so I try and schedule at least 5 sessions, about 5 hours per show. And
you choreograph your own shows?
yes, yeah.
What was your, if you can describe, and we don't have the footage of you, but any particular maneuvers that you did today you're real proud of?
Well, today the Lomshevoks I did went very well. I threw in about 3 of them, and that was successful.
And what are those?
Well, that's a maneuver where you literally get the airplane to tumble end over end, and it's basically based on the gyroscopic force that the propeller provides. So technically, you can't do a textbook Lomshevok in a jet. There's no propeller, there's no gyroscopic force to rely on. That went very well, and everything went well. The conditions have been perfect. It's a great crowd, and the weather has been very good today. Very good. Cleared up, and it's nice and smooth up there.
Larry, you're also a performer of a different kind. You're a musician, composer, and so forth. Do you think performing is performing, kind of no matter what you're doing? You get the same highs?
I would think so. Would you agree? We had dinner the other night and found that we had a lot of mutual friends in music.
Yeah.
I would imagine it's the same, right,
Yeah,
Dave?
very similar. Very similar. It's the type of thing you practice for. A lot of the technical skill involved to play an instrument is very similar to flying. It's something you have to practice and practice until it becomes a conditioned response. And a lot of it transfers, and a lot of the disciplines needed for both transfer.
Absolutely.
Looks like they're taking off.
There's our DC-3
Yep.
with the open door. I don't know if you can see that.
Now, would you ever jump out of a plane?
I've never jumped out of one. Every time I do aerobatics, I have a parachute on, and I know how to use it if I need it, but I don't do sport jumping as a hobby. That's something that I have yet to get into, but it's something that's on
You
the
get in
list.
and you like to stay in, right?
Yes, definitely, definitely.
And what kind of flying do you do? Now, you're an announcer. You obviously know a lot about this subject, but what do you do
Well,
yourself?
it's very funny. I've been around flying all my life, and I was a starving hippie, and as a reward for not getting a day job and staying in music, once I made a living, I decided to get my pilot's license. So I've been reading about them and just around them all my life, and I got my license a few years ago. And so I just do private flying. I do some glider flying, and I went through an aerobatic school over at Santa Paula, where Dave also teaches. Was that the same school? Was it the
Yes,
pit
the
stop?
pit
Right,
stop.
right. And I went through that, so I'm involved in all of it. It's a real love with me. It's fun.
For someone who's interested in learning how to fly, what are the steps they should take to get it, do it?
Well, first step's get a private pilot's license, and for most people that takes about 2 to 3 months if they can commit 3 or 4 days a week. And that's really the first step. Most general aviation airports can supply that training.
David, thanks for being with us today. We're going to go watch the glider show right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.